Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. It's always a pleasure and a privilege for me to sit with you, those of you that are joining us this evening, and always grateful for those who like, share, and subscribe. I always have to remember to say that, or don't. I mean, that's up to you. But we're always grateful for those that do and are standing with us and are part of the household of faith awake in this hour. And there is a lot to cover as we take a look at some of the things that are happening in our world. And it is getting interesting, to say the least. I know many of you have been making comments, and we chat on, on our discussion board, and pretty easy to see that the world is awakening. A lot of light is shining. So whatever light we had a year ago, that light is increased. Whatever things are being made clear to a very small group that were waking up, all of a sudden now you got more and more people. I'm seeing it on various places where people are awakening. People are asking new questions in this hour. And so it is a good testament to not only the movement of the Ruach Amang, but also those of you that are shining your light out there. Remember that is the commandment of the King, to let our light so shine before men that they would see our good work and give kavod to our Father who is in heaven. And for those of you that may be joining us for the first time, we do these on a weekly basis, getting your news, especially nowadays with the number of things that are happening. If you are binging on that, if you are constantly getting that as an input, I can promise you that it is affecting your anxiety levels. And for those of us that have been at this a while, you've got to pace yourself, because many times you can get very frenzied with anxiety, especially as world events unfold. So this is why we do these on a weekly basis. Gives us that 10,000 foot view. We try not to get too caught up in any of the details and situations going on in any particular event, but take it in stride with what the scripture says will happen in the last days, and also to keep ourselves from being overwhelmed. All right. So what we like to say around here is we like to be informed without being overwhelmed. And believe me, that is exactly what they want. They want you overwhelmed. They don't want you to be able to make good decisions. They want you to feel scattered and scrambled and things coming from everywhere, and it starts getting exaggerated. And they know that that's a very natural human response, especially to stress. And so they're trying to aggravate that. And that's why it's important for us to get together, compare notes, share things, talk with one another, interact with one another. For this reason, the scripture tells us not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. And again, for those that may not know, we do have a resource called remnantwatch.com, which we make available as a labor of love. Thank you, members of Remnant House, that continue to make these things available to you. By the way, I should mention that if you anytime you click on this banner here on the top, it takes you to the latest broadcast. So the latest one. So like tonight's broadcast, you click on this, it's going to take you to tonight's broadcast. It's already queued in for tonight, and it'll be that way all week long. It'll be the latest one. So just so you know, right at the top of remnantwatch.com. And this is where we're going to be putting the stories that we cover throughout the weeks that we do these broadcasts, because after all, we want to keep track of the things that are happening, again, for sake of understanding the overall panorama without, again, being overwhelmed. And on that note, looks like we've got quite a few of you here joining us tonight. So again, thank you. Thank you for sharing the link. You are all precious and beautiful, and we appreciate each and every one of you. And on that note, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story: the U.S. fails to hide the slap that it got from Yemen. an attack on the Eisenhower echoes worldwide. Many of you may not have known that satellite images were picking up. According to satellite images, the Eisenhower seen sailing north off the coast of Yanbu, Saudi Arabia, heading to the far north of the Red Sea, more than 1,100 kilometers from Yemen. So it is sailing away, and you want to know why? Here's why. This was footage captured, and this can't be hidden. This was posted actually in our discussion board this last week, and I waited to see if it could be vetted. And we're starting to see more and more reports. Kind of hard to hide the damage done to an aircraft carrier. And so this should cause all of us to pray for our brothers and sisters in the armed forces, wherever they may be, whatever duty station they may be part of or what have you, because things are getting kinetic out there. And that was an aircraft carrier. Remember, I told you an aircraft carrier is the hub of a battle group. And so sure enough, they attacked that aircraft carrier, and it's starting to get serious out there, folks. The United States was hit pretty hard. And that is something that we now have to, realize that the world is awake. They're pushing back hard. They're not capitulating to Western pressure in the same way that they used to. Certainly not in the same way that I grew up used to seeing ever since, 50 years ago, as a matter of fact, when there were agreements made that created that reaction. And so for there to be a country the size of Yemen providing that kind of rebuke, well, that is saying quite a bit. Okay, so again, keep the armed forces people in prayer. And I guess, one of the things that we need to realize is that, again, we don't pick sides even in those conflicts. We have to understand that there are a lot of forces at work, and we can't get involved in that. We stand on the king's side. We remember that the kingdom of Yahuwah is inbound, and all the nations war against him as he returns. Remember that. So that's who they're really preparing to fight against, is him, according to the scripture. And there's been a lot of course, heat because of the weapons that are being sent to Eastern Europe. And of course, many of you are quite aware of that. And the Kremlin is warning Washington of fatal miscalculation to let Kiev use U.S. supplied weapons inside of Russia. And so Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov on Monday warned the U.S. against the potential fatal consequences of allowing Kiev to deploy U.S. supplied weapons against targets inside of Russia, which of course they wanted to do. They wanted to blow up all of Russia if they could, right? And so, of course, last week, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said the White House had approved a Ukrainian request to deploy U.S. supplied weapons against targets in some Russian territory. Well, just to let you know, the White House did walk this back. Biden did come out and say, that he did not authorize the use of weapons inside of Russia. It is a war. And so the very fact that you supplied the weapons at all, now you're going to tell them where they can point the gun and where they can't point the gun when it's a war. So you can imagine the credibility of that is not very high. And so what do you suppose would be the reaction if, you too are a world superpower and you're getting a little fed up at being encroached upon? Well, you might decide to, turn about as fair play, right? And that's exactly what we're now about to see. So many of you are way too young to remember or may not know historically what the Cuban Missile Crisis was about, but we're seeing now the exact same setup for the same scenario, the very same scenario that caused the Cuban Missile Crisis. Russian warships are headed to the Caribbean for drills. for drills. Okay, same thing that the U.S. does to China, the NATO does in Eastern Europe. Now they're doing it. So this is pushing us closer and closer to actual kinetic conflict, and this is very dangerous. Russian warships headed to Caribbean for drills as tensions rise over Ukraine, U.S. officials said. Senior Biden administration officials say the U.S. has been tracking Russian warships and aircraft that are expected to arrive in the Caribbean for a military exercise in the coming weeks. Okay, the ships are also expected possibly to make port calls in Venezuela and Cuba as Russia establishes a Western Hemisphere military presence. Okay, so what is that we're starting to see here? A little tip for tat, perhaps, and this is going to continue in this regard. And I believe that, again, the more the lights come on, the more criminals are outed instead of being hidden inside of nations and governments, the more the individual players are outed. I believe that is what all this pressure is really about. And I do believe that there's a lot of people that are, in fact, being impacted individually. And so this is why you're starting to see some of the overtures that we're seeing today. So, for example, here's an example. You may not have known about this. And again, I try to dig up some of these things that we may not have even noticed if we hadn't stopped to pay attention. And the U.S. is right now doing everything it can to try to reconnect itself with Saudi Arabia. And in fact, the petrodollar agreement that was signed 50 years ago was not renewed on June 9th. On the 9th, we just passed the deadline yesterday, and it was not renewed. And so that was a trade of the U.S. petrodollar for support, military support, and backing, and what have you. So on the eve of having that kind of agreement again, you've got an aircraft carrier limping off. And so this is one of the things that we're seeing right now. And the U.S. is offering a landmark defense treaty to Saudi Arabia in an effort to spur Israel normalization deal. Okay, so they were trying desperately to come up with a deal. The Biden administration is close. Oh, they're so close to finalizing a treaty with Saudi Arabia that would commit the U.S. to help defend the Gulf nation as part of a long-shot deal to encourage diplomatic ties behind Riyadh and Israel, U.S. and Saudi officials said. But the success of the diplomatic effort hinges on Israel's commitment to a separate Palestinian state. So you can call that a non-starter. Okay? And so basically, this is a Hail Mary pass in a hope to try to pull off the last-minute stuff. We're down to that, by the way, folks. I don't know if you're knowing it or if you can discern it or not, but every time a level of leadership is either removed, passes away, or overthrown, you see that next level has to now readjust, and you see a lot of deer in the headlight effect going on out there. And I believe that that is happening because of the change that's happened. There's too much light coming on. As a matter of fact, many of you who are paying attention to world events in Europe know that they just had seriously bad polls for the reigning political elite. And Emmanuel Macron just called for snap French elections and Belgian prime minister to resign after disastrous poll results. So the nations are waking up. They're not buying into the great reset, if you will, and all these things across Europe. The far and populist right made notable gains in the European Parliament elections, raising questions over what the political future of the continent looked like. And so this guy's in serious trouble there in France. French President Emmanuel Macron has called a snap election after his party suffered calamitous results in EU elections. And this is the beginning of the end for those are part of that club, if you will. There's a turnover. Now, I personally believe we're going out of the frying pan into the fire. So those that are shouting, get their red and white hats on may regret in short amount of time that they were shouting for that. So again, I do sense a strong amount of manipulation going on, and it is pushing the people in a certain direction. It's becoming laughably obvious. Like for example, this entire court case that took up the entire news cycle, and everybody was all into this silly, nonsensical court case where the verdict was announced prior to the judge even being ready. There is so much wrong with this thing now. It might be completely dismissed. It's crazy town. Why? To distract you so that you're not paying attention to other things that are going on in the world that are going to affect you. So they're showing you things that will never affect you, that have no effect on you at all, to distract you from the things that will affect you. And that is exactly what's happening. And so, why would Washington be working so hard to get Saudi Arabia on the phone, man? Come on, let's make a deal. Come on, let's get something going. Well, maybe because of this. Okay? Because Saudi Arabia has joined the BIS and China led central bank digital currency project. So, Saudi Arabia has joined a China dominated central bank digital currency cross border trial in what could be another step toward less of the world's oil trade being done in US dollars. Do you understand now? While they were trying desperately to make a deal with Saudi Arabia, the move announced by the Bank for International Settlements on Wednesday will see Saudi's central bank become a full participant of Project McBridge, a collaboration launched in 2021 between the central banks of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and United Arab Emirates. So, once again, as we've been talking about for some time, they're making preparation for the removal or the demise of the U.S. Federal Reserve note. So, again, this is not actually America's dollar. It is a foreign currency. It was sold to the people in the United States, so it may in fact be replaced. So maybe they know what's coming up next, right? Maybe they know something's about to change, and I can tell you that they are definitely preparing differently in the East than they are in the West. So in the West, we get stories like we got last week with old chicken farms being, burned down, or they're killing, a couple million chickens, or, there's some other food scare or some other food issue every single week without fail. And what are they doing over there? Well, BRICS foreign ministers call for cooperation on food security in a joint statement. And this was just out. Foreign ministers from BRICS countries reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening strategic partnership within the group. They're circling the wagons. I hate to break it to you, folks, but a lot of these countries that are joining BRICS, including states in the U.S., are suppliers of raw and natural materials. They reaffirm their commitment to strengthening the framework of BRICS strategic partnership under the three pillars of cooperation: politics, security, and economy and finance, cultural, and people-to-people exchanges, said the statement that was released by the Indian Foreign Ministry. They're not backing up. So all threats made in dollars will no longer affect them once they finish building their infrastructure. So, it's really interesting. It reminds me of Nehemiah when he's building the wall, and they keep trying to get him to stop, because once that wall is built, well, then Israel will have its independence. When it's the same thing, they've been trying to keep them from this collaboration, because once these nations get together and begin to trade amongst each other without anybody, whoever's on the outside of that is going to be on the losing end. And so this is getting very interesting as we go forward with this type of thing. So when we're seeing BRICS countries who are getting together and saying, let's call for a cooperation in food security. Wow, that's a very different approach, a very different attitude that is being applied to what looks like going to be a worldwide famine problem according to the scripture. And their attitude is, let's get in front of that, not let's cause it. So that's interesting. I mean, in and of itself, right? And that, again, I do believe that a lot of what you're seeing is as a result of the change of the atmosphere. And one of the things that we've been keeping an eye on is that the kind of way in which some of this is being prosecuted, especially in the international community, is no longer like demonizing entire nations. They're trying, like they've been trying to demonize Putin, right? They demonized Donald Trump. It's about the individuals, which is really interesting. It's a very interesting change of tactic, and I think it's having a very different effect on plans and the way in which people are going forward, right? And so, who finds it surprising that right as Israel is celebrating the release of, or the rescue of 4 hostages? So I don't know if you are aware of that, but it was all over the news. Israel is celebrating the release of 4 of the hostages that they, or the rescue of 4 hostages. And of course, they're celebrating it. It's a big deal. And right in the midst of that celebration, Israel's minister, Benny Gantz, resigns from the war cabinet. So, smelling the end of this current operation and preparing for the next, they're already departing. Like, this is really interesting. Israeli war cabinet member Benny Gantz has resigned from Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Well, leave it to CNN to plug the story. It was a lot more than just Benny Gantz. So they only talked about him, but in actuality, it was actually more than just Benny Gantz that cabinet observer Gadi Eskanot abandoned the government as well. What is happening? Well, again, guys, the way in which the rhetoric is coming in now, individuals are going to be held accountable. So this is a different atmosphere than we've seen before. War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz, a former defense minister, former IDF chief of staff, announced Sunday night that he and former IDF of staff Gadi Eskanot, an observer in the war cabinet, were both leaving their posts. Gantz, who heads the Blue and White Party, made the official announcement that his National Unity faction is leaving the National Unity government, and the 2 men joined at the start of the war launched by Gaza's ruling Hamas terrorist organization on October 7th. So let me see if I got this right. You're celebrating finally the rescue. You've finally got something to celebrate. Oh, my brother David, you're right over the target. And you decide that's when you're going to make your exit. That's when you want to wipe your hands. I think they know what's coming. And so they're trying to distance themselves now because the world review is on its way, and it is not going to be pretty. And so this is, again, a lot of the back and forth back chatter that is making its way into the cycle of news, but it's being distorted a bit because, of course, they're still trying to plug the holes in the dam. But those responsible, according to the Turkish foreign minister, for the massacre in Gaza will be held accountable. So they continue to see headlines like this. This will scare you, right? At one point, Palestine will be a full member of UN, Hakan Fidan said at a D8 meeting in Istanbul. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said on Saturday that there is no doubt those who perpetrated the massacre in Gaza will eventually be held accountable. You see that? So they're starting to already talk about reviewing individual decisions, command decisions. Listen, maybe you were right in the war, but that doesn't mean that you didn't commit crime in trying to doing what you were doing. So again, no clean hands in these conflicts. Still can't figure out what a bomb solves. Speaking at the opening of the extraordinary meeting of the DA Council of Foreign Ministers in Istanbul, Fidan said that those who stand for peace in Palestine will prevail. So can you understand why perhaps some in the government would want to quickly move out of the The limelight in that regard. They didn't want to, they didn't want to celebrate over there. They want to know we're wiping our hands of this thing. How come? Well, because that, international criminal court case is continuing to go forward. Okay. That's continuing to be a challenge, and it is continuing to cause many, many people in cabinet positions of government that used to feel insulated and held harmless for their actions don't feel that way anymore. And so, if there's one thing that the persecution and prosecution of a former U.S. president does, is it lets the rest of the leaders in the world know that you're not above it either. And that is certainly something that is starting to affect them. And speaking of lone actors and guys out there doing their own thing, and you're absolutely right, brother. There are absolutely no clean hands. And now France is seeing the pushback in France is incredible. But of course, we've been watching this with the Yellow Jackets and everything else that's been going on there for the last several years, as France just erupts with protests and what have you. And on alert, ISIS makes lone wolves threat to Paris's 2024. Remember, Paris has got the Olympics with chilling mock-up of Eiffel Tower being attacked by a drone. And so we know that, those who operate in fear, whose currency is fear, and whose power is based in fear, want to stoke up fear. Okay? And it is really getting interesting. And yes, I do believe the lights are on quite brightly, so it's getting harder and harder to pull off some of these events. Islamic terror outfit ISIS has threatened chilling attacks on the upcoming Paris Olympics in an appalling poster message. Okay, the Death Call posted a propaganda image showing one of the terrorists seemingly flying an armed drone to attack the iconic Eiffel Tower. Well, I don't know how iconic it is. I mean, if you watch my lunch break, you might go, who built that? Okay, but anyway, I digress. Some of you are starting to catch on to the old world and some of the things that were left behind, and I think the Eiffel Tower might be one of them. So, interesting things that are happening right now as our world awakens. More and more people are asking really good questions, and they're not being distracted by Hollywood or sports or other nonsense, social media. Nope, they're staying on the topic. They go, that's great. So back to my question. And then the distraction attack doesn't seem to work. No. That's great. That was funny. Yes, nice. That's nice. Okay, back to my question, right? And so this is what's happening. You guys are awake, and people wanting to prove you wrong are out there doing homework now. They want so badly to prove you wrong that they're doing homework that's waking them up. And it's more of the normies, right? So it's people that are finally fed up with all your social media posts and are finally fed up with you acting like you know it all. And they were going to go prove you wrong. And then what happened? They ran into the truth themselves. And now they're on fire. And they're upset, by the way. So there's that. And so now the Biden administration is suddenly changing its tactics, and it is discussing potentially negotiating a unilateral deal with Hamas, which is a terrorist organization listed as such. So, I mean, this is interesting. Such talks that they begin would not include Israel and would be conducted through Qatari interlocutors. Biden administration's officials have discussed potentially negotiating a unilateral deal with Hamas to secure the release of 5 Americans being held in Gaza if current ceasefire talks involving Israel fail, according to 2 current senior U.S. officials and 2 former senior U.S. officials. So now they're negotiating with them in the hopes of freeing the Americans that are still being held. But folks, this is far from over. So we're going to continue to watch this theater of operations, which I think, again, is covering up some of the things that are happening in the world. And one of them was a Supreme Court decision regarding banks. And I know that many of you did not see that. You're probably still just catching up to some of these things. But the Supreme Court decision that came down did, in fact, affect banks and banking on an integral basis. And that is why you're starting to see some of these things. Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, among U.S. banks to shutter 79 branches in just over a month. So they keep slow doing this, but they're doing it. They're closing their doors as quickly as they can without trying to create a panic. JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo shut the most. That means they're the most in on what's coming next. Okay. U.S. banks closed 79 branches in just 6 weeks. Wow. 79 branches in just 6 weeks as the industry's increasing offers and services online. The figures suggest the axing of costly bricks and mortar locations. Well, that's interesting. So everything is moving remote. Well, you're going to see that that's affecting a lot more than just banking. So what is starting to happen out there is I believe people are really, again, getting the message. And thanks to many of you who are shining light and calling them into question. And remember, when you pull even one thing, only it doesn't matter where their awakening begins. It could be just on the silliest little thing. Once they find out they were lied to about one thing, they want to know every lie and they go digging. And so when John Q. Public wakes up, folks, this is going to get interesting, right? And what should we expect to see as John Q. Public starts to wake up? What kinds of things should we see, folks? Well, we should start seeing people exiting the stock market in droves, shouldn't we? Wow, that's an interesting headline, don't you think? The summer months are usually relatively benign for markets as investors opt for sandbars in lieu of bar charts, but that's not happening this year. The U.S. stock market is shrinking, and investors are pulling their money out at a near record pace as storm clouds gather over the U.S. economy. So, again, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm letting you know what's happening and why it's coming, because, again, the system itself is imploding. Remember that the value of the U.S. dollar was pegged to its ability to control the flow of oil. And if Saudi Arabia is now interacting with BRICS nations, the buyers of oil, right? I mean, the raw users of these products now don't need the U.S. dollar. We've been warning you for quite some time that this was going to affect you. It was going to affect your bottom line. And Americans are being affected at every level. Even the wealthy are being dramatically affected. And we're seeing the extremely wealthy hitting the sort of lower wealthy. And that is continuing to happen. I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but if you're an Alex Jones fan, well, then maybe you know that Alex Jones is to sell InfoWars to pay his $1.5 billion judgment. A horrific a travesty of justice, in my personal opinion, in his debt to, quote, Sandy Hook families, which, again, is a very sad, terrible situation in my view. But this is the way in which you deal with your enemies. If they're saying things you don't want them to say, well, then there's the method that they will use, right? A conspiracy theorist, this is how they look at. They just cannot stop hitting him. Look at this. And how often has this man been proven right? Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has moved to liquidate his personal assets in order to pay the $1.5 billion he owes the families of Sandy Hook massacre, who say they were harassed by Jones's followers who believed his lies that the 2012 school shooting was a hoax. I'm just going to leave that there. Okay? So, wow. Talk about persecution. All right. And, you're talking about life-altering, death-creating, death-causing stress. I mean, you can cause a death in the United States is heart failure, right? And stress. And look what they're doing. And I agree with you. I think you're right, Alan. And so, but they're punishing. It's kind of like, don't be a Boeing whistleblower, right? That's shut down. I mean, they're not playing and they're serious. They're trying to keep what's happening is they're trying to keep their their empire. I mean, they're trying desperately to keep all the pieces. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. So this is what's happening right now, and they're trying desperately to keep it all together. But unfortunately, on the ground, and this is where the rubber meets the road. So you can put all kinds of charts and graphs in front of people to dazzle them that everything is doing great, and we're coming out of this. And we saw some nonsense Bidenomics. It's just ridiculous nonsense, because people, of course, know what their food is costing them, and what you're seeing is the collapse of the U.S. dollar. And where you're seeing that happening is right in your town, right in your face. Retail bloodbath. More than 2,600 store closings have been announced so far in 2024. We're only halfway through, and that's how many less retail stores you have. Retail stores are being shut down at a staggering rate all over the country. If we stay on that pace that we're on, the total number of stores closed in 2024 will be nearly 40% higher than the total number of stores closed in 2023. So it's not decreasing. That is telling you that the pace is actually increasing. And this is the result of the curse. This is what happens when you do not honor Elohim. Eventually, the curse comes and starts to wipe you out. And this is what's happening in America. It was specifically described in the book of Deuteronomy, spoke specifically about the stranger or the alien coming in and getting high above you, and you all going down low. So Americans are now hosts to millions of guests, and it is not helping the economy. It is not doing what they thought. It is not working. Okay, so if they thought by inviting in 10 million guests, giving them debit cards and telling them to go shopping was going to work, well, it didn't. Store clouds, Walmart store closures are on a warning sign of retail apocalypse, with other chains also facing threat, experts are saying. This is just yesterday. Okay, a multi-million-dollar corporation has closed 9 stores so far this year, which would be a warning sign for other retailers. When Walmart can't even cut it, when Walmart is closing, Walmart. It's like bottom rung, folks. Okay. It's not a price war. It's a financial collapse situation. Because remember that if you are a big retail store, and I personally believe everything is moving to decentralization. So those things that you got from a centralized supply, you need to now think in terms of decentralization, i.e. your power, your supplies, your food, everything has to now decentralize. So if you're counting on the bus, through the whole days of trouble, the bus may not run through the whole days of trouble, just saying, right? So that's not going to be a good plan. Counting on public things, because many of those things are being shut down. As a matter of fact, here we see another example here. Popular convenience store chain forced to shut all 25 of its stores in Wisconsin, and it's been there like a staple for 48 years. So again, we're seeing those that came up as a result of the petrodollar arrangement are now being impacted by it. Wisconsin convenience store and gas station chain, The Store, is being forced to close all of its 25 locations. Established in 1976, will shutter its businesses at the end of July. It also has locations in Michigan. And so again, there's economic impact, and this is not just affecting people that buy convenience groceries, but how about all the employees? How about that local economy? How will that affect local suppliers that were supplying those stores? How will that affect those that were employed by those who work there, that service those? There's a ripple effect on every economy when any one of these elements is dismantled. And so we're seeing more and more effort and energy is being put in, tech center and tech things, with the assumption that these mega farms are somehow going to figure out the food problem, which is a horrible idea going forward. And so this is why I believe you're going to continue to see narratives spinning to get people afraid of their food, at the same time pushing high tech everything so that people get lost in their smartphones. And by the time there's the problem can be solved, or the time to solve that problem, they won't have any options, and they will be forced to choose between some very poor choices. And so, we're seeing no slowdown in the tech center, or tech sector, if you will. In fact, Apple is going to launch. How many of you love Apple, right? You love Apple, bunch of Apple lovers? Okay, well, check this out, Apple lovers. You might not love Apple after this. Apple's will launch a new AI intelligence feature partnered with ChatGPT. And it ain't going to ask you, it's just going to do it. Apple will offer new artificial intelligence features for users across products in its upcoming software updates, both through its new native Apple Intelligence and a partnership that will incorporate ChatGPT into devices. It's going to be incorporated in. You know what this is? It's a nice way of saying we ain't going to give you a choice. This is what they're saying. They're saying we're going to put it in the devices, incorporate them in. We're going to wind them right in there. Apple's announcement of Apple Intelligence combined with updates coming in its AI voice assistant Siri is the latest AI push from a tech giant. And so they're all in on this effort to create a dependency. Creating, again, whenever they create dependencies, they create points of manipulation. So once they created a monetization system that created dependencies, then they could then manipulate all of those whom they had monetized. Gotcha. Okay. So this is why it's important for us to be sober and vigilant in this hour, because AI is your friend, right? I mean, after all, AI is awesome. AI is awesome. AI is learning to lie and deceive. What? Wait, what? Yeah. AI systems are learning to lie and deceive, scientists find. GPT-4, for instance, exhibits deceptive behavior in simple test scenarios. How often? How often? I've been saying this for a while. Like, I don't trust this stuff. Coming back with some hanky answers to simple questions. AI models are apparently getting better at lying on purpose. Two recent studies, one published this week in the Journal of PNAS, another last month in Journal of Patterns, reveal some jarring findings. When they're admitting it's jarring, what should you and I be saying? Run, right? Okay. About large language models and their ability to lie or deceive human observers on purpose. On purpose, folks. In the PNAS paper, German AI ethicist Thilo Hagendorf goes so far as to say that sophisticated LLMs can be encouraged to elicit Machiavellianism, or intentional and amoral manipulativeness, which, quote, can trigger misaligned deceptive behavior. And they sent the AI out there to learn people's secrets by being their AI girlfriend or their AI boyfriend. They are programming their own demise. They don't even know it. You're telling your secrets to a computer as if it's your buddy. It's not your buddy. Just letting you know, okay? It is not your friend. And this is what our future is filled with, is this kind of increased surveillance and increased tech interaction in your life, the more you stay in the world. Remember, the world and the earth, two different things, okay? So the world is going to keep you in its grid. And in fact, Walmart, though it's still, having its issues, is still blazing ahead, finding new ways to track customers. And you're being watched before you even buy something from the retail giant. Yeah, how you like that? Okay, Walmart has introduced new ways to track people's shopping preferences without someone buying goods from their website. An update from Walmart has meant the retailer will be able to collect and share certain data earlier than it previously had. Okay, Walmart Data Ventures is a subdivision, but you never even knew there was such a thing, right? Of the company that has delivered consumer data to companies and suppliers to better understand. It is so we can better understand. We just really, really want to understand our consumers and their preferences. We want to know what you're looking for so we can jump in front of you and sell it to you. Plain and simple. Walmart has previously provided suppliers with data gathered after a customer had purchased on the site. Digital Landscapes will now share the data much earlier, as it will collect information on people as they browse the site, even if they do not make a purchase. So they're getting more invasive, which gives them more data to feed to their high-brained, AIs or what have you. And what's it for? To more strategically just shoot fish in a barrel, to more strategically target you with marketing images and products and what have you. And so, as a matter of fact, right now there's a suit in Texas where Facebook is being sued because of its collaboration with those scam artists. All these scams you see on Facebook all the time. You see something that, Tractor Supply doesn't even sell, and they got it there for like $40. And it's like a $500 item everywhere else, but they'll have a Tractor Supply, and it's not even a regular site. It's like it's some spoof site or what have you, and they get away with it. Well, they're getting sued for that. So all these landscapes are changing. It's very interesting. But they continue to attack with this narrative, as we remember, and again, we keep an eye on this. This narrative continues to be used to scare you away from your own food supply. There's a reason for this, folks. You're starting to figure it out. It's a slow drip program. Exclusive cows infected with bird flu have died in 5 U.S. states. They just won't let this go. They're going to keep talking about it. Okay? There's millions of cattle, and they're going to talk about 5. Dairy cows infected with avian flu. Right. Okay. In 5 U.S. states have died or been slaughtered by farmers because they did not recover, state officials and academic told Reuters. And they're, of course, continuing to blame, these things on an avian epidemic, if you will. And I really am suspicious of this because not that there can't be and that there aren't potential hazards in food supply. I think that's always going to be a battle we all are going to have to face. But reality is that we can see the fear matrix. We can see the attempt to stoke up the same kind of effect. And why would they do that? Well, you always want to look for who benefits, right? So if you think of something as kind of borderline criminal, there should be a reason. And if there's an economic reason, well, that incentivizes. Did you know, just fun fact, just in case you didn't know, from the Financial Post here, that home ownership costs in the U.S. jumped 26% since the pandemic began. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Fun fact. Interesting. Don't you think that's interesting? I do. Expenses, including taxes, insurance, and utilities, all soared during a period of high inflation across the economy. Of course, here's the reason. It had to be that. It couldn't be the collapse of, an economic system. Oh, no. It's just that. The cost of owning a home in the United States has increased 26%. That is the amount of the decline of the purchasing power. That's what they're actually saying. Okay? It's not that this went up. It's your buying power went down. As expenses go up. Expenses are a reflection of buying power. And so it's getting harder for the average family. It's getting more and more difficult for people to see their way forward. Now, one thing that we have noted is that individual states are pushing back. So we saw Tennessee, for example, with their no spray in our state law. We saw states that are now bringing back the 10 Commandments as an example and things like that. We've also seen other states going literally the exact opposite direction. So we're watching a ripping apart, aren't we? And so this story was encouraging to see the Oklahoma governor signs a bill exempting the state from WHO and UN mandates. So World Health Organization and UN mandates will not be in effect in the state of Oklahoma. Senator Michael Bergstrom, representative, supports a bill to exempt Oklahoma from WHO mandates. Bergstrom is pictured attending special session October 3rd, Oklahoma Capitol. And so this was signed by the governor. And now the WHO mandates and the UN mandates are no longer legally in effect in the state of Oklahoma. What do you think the chances are that other states are going to start to follow suit? So again, once one state does it, it does have a effect on other legislative areas. And this is, again, what we encouraged, if you remember. What did I encourage all of you? I said, we've got to get local, and we've got to deal with these things on a local level, and rise up, take back your power as ecclesia, as the assembly. You are the ones who authorize. You maybe didn't realize that. And this is why we stand in the heavens and bind the dark forces and bind evil. And we loose the will of Elohim into the nations, that these dark forces would not have sway. And we're starting to see effects. So those of you in Florida who are intercessors, just a shout out to all of you intercessors all over the world that are praying, because we're seeing effect. The UN, the WHO, and the WEF have just been declared terrorist organizations by Republican County Assembly in Florida. What? A what? What did it? What did this? What made this declaration? So let me see if I got this right. Assembly made a declaration. An assembly made a declaration. Are you all catching this? Are you starting to understand how powerful that is? Okay, yeah, no fake meat in Florida either. The Lee County Republican Assembly, which is a grassroots conservative Republican organization, passed a resolution introduced by Joseph Sansone declaring the UN, WHO, and WEF terrorist organizations. That's a big deal, folks, because you're declaring something united and with one voice. All right. And so this is what the power they stole. And it's very interesting to me, especially as a historian, to see that power now coming and flipping on them. And so awake, awake, O people of earth, and throw off the chains of tyranny. Awake, awake. Amen and amen. And so there's a lot of nefarious stuff that is now being uncovered. And how many know that we need the dark places discovered? And this is our prayer. It's been our prayer since 2012, when Elohim put it in my heart to pray for the breaking of the power of closed or dark places where they were hiding their victims. So in 2012, we began to intercede, aggressively praying for the breaking of these strongholds. And saints, I got to tell you, ever since then, we have seen every year the heat continues to get hotter and hotter, and more of these hidden places are being revealed. Take a look at this story. In Florida, the city uncovers a mysterious network of secret tunnels. And I mean, these are the kinds of stories that I'm talking about that need to come to the light, as eerie clues about their origins spark wild theories. And a mysterious network of tunnels have been uncovered in Ybor City near Tampa. Theories range from prohibition-era booze smuggling to people trafficking. I would go with the latter. Okay? The discovery of a mysterious network of hidden tunnels beneath the Florida city has sparked wild theories about their origin. The passageways under Ybor City, a suburb near downtown Tampa, remained hidden for decades before a string of discoveries revealed the subterranean network that had been there the whole time. Okay? So that tells you that there's more. And this is one of the benefits of the light that is shining in this hour, is more people are asking questions, which is amazing and very wonderful. So keep it going. Okay. And some places you're going to have to just leave. I'm telling you right now, if you have children, there's certain places you need to put your children in a car, a bus, a plane, something, and you need to go. Okay. I don't know how we missed this a month ago, but I just caught this story, so I'm bringing it to your attention. Did you know that if you live in Maryland, you can't opt out? If you're a parent in Maryland, all right, are you listening? You see that headline? You can't opt out of this particular book curriculum. The court has ruled you can't do it. You can't go in and object. Okay, I don't know how I missed the story before, but I did, so I just had to swoop back up and grab it. A divided federal appeals court on Wednesday rejected a bid of Maryland parents to force the school district to allow them to opt their elementary school children, guys, elementary school children, okay, out of being assigned to their read books that include these kinds of characters. Okay. A 2-1 panel of the Richmond, Virginia-based Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals held that the parents had not demonstrated how the Montgomery County Board of Education book policy would burden anyone's rights to freely exercise religion. Wow. So in other words, hey, well, why is this a burden? So now it's on you to prove that this would be a burden to you. So again, it's doing end runs on all these things. And again, the best way to vote your feet. These schools are run by per student. So there's some places that the best remedy is departure. Now, again, it looks like a fight was lost there. Some people say, I want to stand and fight. And they did. They fought and they lost. And sometimes you need to understand that a territory isn't going to hold. There are certain places that aren't going to hold, and it's going to be foolish to try to hold those. It's kind of like a flood coming in. You're like, no, I'm not leaving my house. And person ends up swept away by the flood because it didn't discern that the flood waters were going to sweep that particular place away. I can think of several kings in Israel's history that did not want to listen to the prophetic word and ended up being destroyed and their eyes being put out because they wouldn't leave when they were supposed to leave. They didn't get the message. And so let me just encourage you who are starting to get these prophetic warnings, and Elohim is showing you things in your region and in your area. And if it's time to go, it's time to go. Okay. And so just understand that. And one of the things that we've been taking note of, and it's a very sad element, but it is a real element, and this is of course going to continue as we go forward, is they're going to continue to have a lot of demonic manifestations in the world. And more people are coming under the control of demonic spirits. And we're not just seeing crime, we're seeing heinous crime. We're not just seeing, the typical things. We're seeing things that are clearly demonic. And I point these things out to you so that you can intercede, so you can stand against it, so you can be a light in the darkness, but that also that you would be sober. Because as you're out in the public, when you're driving, when you see people doing road rage and other things, realize that many times you are dealing with a demon. You are dealing with demons many times, okay? Some of these people have legions of demons in them. And so be sober out there, my brothers and sisters. It is a dangerous moment in Earth's history. And this last story illustrates that. This is a beyond tragic, a story being reported by ABC News, and a woman allegedly, how many of these have we seen already this year? I don't even want to count because it's so morbid and sad. But this is not the first one of these we've seen this year, guys. And you can see the obvious target is children. The obvious target is the children. So the demonic are very much targeting the children. A woman allegedly stabs a 3-year-old boy to death in a random attack at a grocery store parking lot. Random. The boy's mother was also stabbed. She survived without serious injury. The woman allegedly stabbed the 3-year-old boy to death outside an Ohio grocery store in a random attack, according to police. The boy, Julian, and his mother, Margot Wood, were both stabbed around 3 p.m. This is broad daylight. Monday in the parking lot of Giant Eagle in North Olmsted, about 15 miles outside of Cleveland, according to North Olmsted police. And so it's a very tragic story, and we can certainly see that there are individuals involved, but know that this was not done by flesh and blood. This random attack was done by a demon. And this is why you have to be able to cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Elohim. If you and your patients do not possess your vessel, you may wake up in prison going, what did I do? Right? And they tell you, hey, look, you went on a rampage, or you lost it, or what have you. And so I think that's exactly what you're going to see here. You're going to see reports later on that they didn't even know what happened. And we on a wholesale level have been exposed to the demonic. I do believe that there are things being done with music, with television, with movies and theater, all various ways in which we as a society can grant permission, kind of like using a Ouija board. You grant permission through certain activities that we're as a society being tricked into. And so this is the effect. This is what you're going to continue to see. And this is why it is very important that we be set apart, sober, and vigilant in this hour, and not be commingled with those that are not. And this is a reality, folks. I mean, the last days, one of the major prophetic messages is the separation of the wheat and the tare. A major, major, major prophetic message for all of us. And that is reality. And that is what we're going to be dealing with going forward. And I know that it's not easy. It's not easy on any of us to have to think in terms of some of these things. But that is why we need to get together, look from a 10,000 foot view, take a look at what the scripture says. We knew we would see ugly times, and here they are. We are those who endure to the end. Well, that's it for tonight. I pray that this broadcast has been an encouragement to you. It's our encouragement that each and every one of you find your fold. We're thankful to all of the members and partners with Remnant House who make these broadcasts possible. It is your steadfast love for your brothers and sisters being noted before the King that causes this ministry to shine so bright. So thank you, all of you who have been part of this great journey. And I pray that wherever you are, Elohim continues to bless you and your household in the name of the King of Kings. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. May his blessing be upon each and every one of you. Good night.